There's a big debate happening in Scotland. In just a few months' time we will be asked whether or not we want to be an independent country. I've never voted before, and over the past year I've really started to look into both sides of the argument. This has changed my view of things, which is why I want to share with you my story. 2 years ago I had no interest in the debate. It just seemed like these guys were saying how good everything will be, and these guys were telling us everything's going to get worse. The whole thing was becoming rather boring because, let's face it, most of us had already made up our minds.
No. Sorry.
And that's because we all know Scotland couldn't survive without the rest of the UK.
I have to say to the honourable gentleman, if we had an independent Scotland, you wouldn't be flying planes, you'd be flying by the seat of your pants.
We're actually subsidising a whole bunch of their spending, and if they are going to be independent, you crack on, Scotland, because you're going to find it a lot more expensive to live where you live.
Please, sir, I want some more.
So there you have it, no secret, we couldn't even afford to have planes. So that was that. I didn't even have to think about it anymore. Or so I thought. You know that really annoying friend that's always sharing political things on Facebook? Well, one day my cybernet shared an article that I actually found interesting. It said that some guy who's a main funder of Better Together also had a history of doing business with war criminals and foreign dictators. Despite people calling for the dodgy donation to be returned, the pro-UK campaign decided to keep it. The whole incident didn't change my thoughts on independence, but I couldn't believe the campaign I had begun to associate myself with would act like this. As strange as it sounds, I kind of look at this moment as my political awakening.
I am awake.
I actually started to do some more research. It turns out that the guy who was chosen to lead the Better Together campaign wasn't quite the honest politician I thought he was.
And I am delighted that heading up that campaign is a man of the status of Alistair Darling, who, whatever people think about him, would never impugn his integrity.
I just want to talk about your own position, because the Daily Telegraph reported a couple of weeks back that you flipped your designated second home on 4 occasions to profit from the additional costs allowance. Is that correct?
I never really liked Darling anyway. I mean, those eyebrows gave me the heebie-jeebies. I'd never expected Alistair Darling to be one of those MPs who was up to his neck in taxpayers' cash during the expenses scandal. He had managed to flip his house so many times that he coined the nickname Flipper, and he wasn't the only one up to no good. These two are still refusing to release documents about Scotland that were meant to be made public back in 2013. Apparently, they're worried that the contents of the documents might boost support for the pro-independence campaign. Or what about when the UK government were asked to give a basic statement about what would happen after a yes or no vote?
We've put into our report a recommendation that if both governments could agree a joint statement which would outline a timetable or time frame and what would happen after the yes or no vote, then the voters would appreciate that, and we've made that a recommendation.
So given that the UK government and indeed the Labour Party have called for the full acceptance of the Electoral Commission recommendations, will the Prime Minister today give a commitment that he will work with the Scottish Government in advance of the referendum to come up with this joint position? We will not pre-negotiate Scotland's exit from the United Kingdom.
Who said anything about pre-negotiations?
Ours isn't about pre-negotiations or about the negotiated terms of independence and the detail of that. No, it's not that. It's just a simple statement for people who are voting who would know the morning after the referendum, when the results declared, they know what the next steps that will be taken.
I started to find myself in the awkward position of being pro-UK but not trusting the Unionist campaign. So I went back to the research. I wanted to know exactly what I'd been lied to about and what was truth. I'd been told Scotland couldn't survive as an independent country, but thanks to the Financial Times, it didn't take me long to find out that this was a lie. Not only is Scotland richer than the UK, but even if you don't count any of the oil, we are still a rich country. I'd been told we wouldn't be able to get into the EU and we'd be kicked out if we voted for independence.
When we have said that an independent Scotland would have to apply to join the European Union,
then I found this expert who worked on the entry of 14 countries into the EU, and he says we wouldn't have any trouble getting in.
The process of negotiating membership between the referendum and the date of independence would take not more than 1 or 2 years. Subsequently, the Scottish Government has fixed on 18 months, and my view is that that's tough but realistic. There's no way the European Union can oblige new members either to join the euro or the Schengen zone.
In fact, the only reason we might be taken out of the EU is if we vote no, and this guy keeps doing well in elections in England.
That if Scotland were to leave the United Kingdom, she would have to sign a new treaty that would commit her to signing up to the single currency. So that, I think, has perhaps made a bigger difference in the Scottish debate than anything that's happened before.
Better Together and the UK government had also told us that if we voted for independence, there would be no currency union between Scotland and the rest of the UK, and that we wouldn't be allowed to use the pound. But guess what? That doesn't seem to be true either.
If the Scots vote for independence, of course a deal will be done about the currency, because it's not in London's interests to have a rancorous relationship with Edinburgh. And even if a deal was not done, how does one country stop another country using its currency?
Is it just me, or is there a pattern emerging here? I'm starting to think that these people do not have Scotland's best interests at heart. If they did, why would they keep lying to us about this stuff? Then I saw this interview explaining what the Unionists would give us if we vote no.
We took the judgment that actually there might be an issue if you had the flexibility to cut as well as raise the top level. You might create a degree of tax competition across the United Kingdom.
Again, you're critical. This is a very peculiar way to run a tax system.
Well, you may think it's peculiar, but then what we have here is an interesting combination of us being part of the United Kingdom, which shares and pools risk and resource, but also gives the Scottish Parliament accountability.
What about tax bans? Can we change them?
No.
But of course, what your critics will say is that what you're ruling in is Scotland making tax changes which could put itself at a disadvantage when it comes to tax rates in the rest of the UK, and what you're specifically ruling out is Scotland changing tax in a way that could put itself at an advantage.
Well, what we certainly don't want is a nationalist government to come in and cut the top rate of top rate of income tax and end up effectively almost breaking the union by the back door.
Now, I don't like Alex Salmond or the SNP, but I really do agree with a lot of the stuff that the Yes campaign says. I want to get rid of nuclear weapons from Scotland. I think they should never have been allowed to bring in the bedroom tax, or the poll tax for that matter, and I would like to keep free tuition and the NHS. I don't know how I'm going to vote come September, but every day I'm finding it harder and harder to imagine myself in that polling booth putting a cross next to anything but a yes vote. I'm not making this video to try to convince you to vote either way. That is for you to decide. All I hope to achieve here is to get people talking about their own experience in this referendum, whatever side you think you will vote for. It should be the people having a say in the discussion, not just the politicians.